That obese thing warmed my bed last night. Mountain man's fat male, order bride. Secret, they didn't even call her by her name. That obese thing warmed my bed last night. The sheriff laughed loudly, his voice echoing across the tiny railroad platform of Coldwater Junction. Blackwood says he nearly froze to death just looking at her. The men around him roared with cruel laughter. Their breath steamed in the January air, their jokes sharper than the wind cutting across the Montana Territory in the winter of 1878. On the far end of the platform, the obese thing stood alone. Her name was Eliza Hart. 25 years old, she was shorter than most men, but her body was wide, soft, generously curved beneath a brown wool dress that had grown too tight across her hips and bust during the long journey. Her cheeks were round and flushed from the cold, her brown eyes swollen from too many secret tears. A wooden sign hung from a rope around her neck. The letters burned into the surface. Mail order bride, property of Mr. Thomas Blackwood. When she stepped off the train the night before, she had stepped into a lie. Thomas Blackwood, a wealthy rancher in his late 40s, had ordered her through a mail-order catalog and 6 months of careful letters. In his letters, he'd called her "my sweet Eliza," written poems about the softness of her hands and the warmth of her heart. The tiny photograph she'd sent, taken years earlier when she was thinner, had been tucked into his vest pocket like a promise. But when he saw her in person, he had gone pale. The first words out of his mouth had been a hissed accusation. "You tricked me. That photo was from another life. I asked for a wife, not a walking barrel of lard." She had slept that first night in his spare room at the boarding house, shivering in a narrow bed while he drank himself senseless downstairs and told filthy jokes about her to anyone who would listen. Later, she heard his mocking voice drift up through the floorboards. "That obese thing warmed my bed last night," he bragged. "Not in it, thank God. Just in the house. I didn't have to put extra wood on the fire." Now, in the cold gray light of morning, he had dragged her back to the station. The train she'd arrived on was gone. There was no return ticket, no way back to Ohio, no money in her reticule. "Gentlemen," Blackwood announced, shoving Eliza forward so that she stumbled, skirts swishing around her legs. "Who wants her? Healthy, big-boned girl, eats too much, talks too little. I'll throw in the trunk of her things for free." The small crowd of ranch hands, drifters, and townsfolk chuckled. Someone called out that they wouldn't take her, even if Blackwood paid them. Another suggested she'd be useful as a draft animal. A boy of no more than 12 packed a snowball and hurled it at her chest. Impact thudded against her ribs. Wet, icy slush slid down her bodice. Eliza flinched but did not lift her head. Shame burned hotter than the wind was cold. If you're listening to this right now, somewhere in the world, in a small room, on a crowded bus, in a distant country, ask yourself, how many times has the world laughed while you stood alone? Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Let me know if you've ever felt like Eliza, unwanted in a place where everyone could see you, but no one really looked. "Come on, somebody take her," Blackwood barked. "Big girl like this will keep a cabin warm all winter." Silence fell. No one stepped forward, until a tall man in a worn bearskin coat pushed away from the hitching rail and walked slowly toward them. Gray eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his hat. The tall stranger moved like the winter wind itself, silent, steady, cutting through the crowd without hesitation. His boots crunched over the ice-crusted snow, his broad shoulders wrapped in a dark wolf fur coat that looked handmade rather than bought. Men stepped aside instinctively, women lowered their gazes. Even from behind her curtain of hair, Eliza felt his presence before she saw him. The sheriff cleared his throat, suddenly less amused. "McCrae, didn't know you were in town." Silas McCrae. The name carried weight in the Montana Territory, whispered like a warning or a prayer depending on who spoke it. A mountain man with a reputation carved from a life lived too close to death. Trapper, guide, hunter, the kind of man who survived winters that killed entire ranching families. He rarely came down from the range except to buy supplies or deliver furs, and he never stayed long. Silas stopped 2 paces from Blackwood and Eliza. The wind tugged his coat open just enough to reveal the worn leather shirt beneath, the scar running from his collarbone to the edge of his jaw, a reminder of some old battle he never talked about. "What's going on here?" Silas asked, voice low, steady, almost bored, but with an undertone that made grown men cautious. Blackwood puffed up his chest. "Just disposing of a problem. Ordered a bride. She lied about her appearance. I'm returning the merchandise." Eliza's stomach knotted. Merchandise. Not even livestock. Merchandise. Silas's gaze slid to her, taking her in with one long, unreadable sweep. The snow in her hair, her trembling hands, her soaked bodice, the humiliation weighing on her shoulders like chains. He didn't smirk. He didn't stare. He didn't sneer the way the other men had. He simply observed, quietly, intently, and something flickered behind his eyes, something she couldn't name. "She's not merchandise," Silas said. Blackwood scoffed. "She's not my wife either. I sent for a beauty. Got a pig instead." A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. Eliza flinched, fighting the instinct to curl in on herself. She'd spent most of her life hearing variations of the same words, from neighbors, from strangers, even from her own father. "Look at her," Blackwood continued, tugging the wooden sign hanging from her neck so hard it cut into her skin. "You think anyone wants to marry that?" Eliza didn't know why she lifted her eyes, maybe desperation, maybe defiance. But she did, and when she did, her gaze collided with Silas McCrae's. He didn't look away, he didn't laugh, he didn't pity her. Instead, his expression hardened, like something inside him clicked into place. "That's enough," Silas said quietly. Blackwood blinked. "Excuse me?" Silas repeated. "That's enough," and stepped between them. His presence blocked the wind, the stares, even the cold itself. Eliza could suddenly breathe again. Blackwood's voice rose. "What's it to you? I can toss her back on the train, let her freeze out here, or—" "You won't." Silas's tone was final, as if he had already decided the outcome. The crowd watched, holding its breath. "Why do you care?" Blackwood demanded. "Unless you actually want this obese thing?" Gasps, whispers. A few people snickered, expecting Silas to deny it, to walk away. Instead, Silas reached for the rope around Eliza's neck. His fingers brushed her collarbone as he untied it, gentle in a way she hadn't felt in years. The wooden sign dropped into the snow with a dull thud. "I'll take her," Silas said. The world went silent. Snowflakes drifted between them like suspended time. Blackwood's jaw dropped. "You'll take her? For what? Charity? A joke?" Silas held his gaze. 50 cents, the posting fee." Blackwood sputtered. I don't want her. You can have her for nothing." Silas didn't move. 50 cents. Blackwood hesitated, greed winning the battle against pride. He snatched the coin Silas flicked toward him. "Fine, she's yours. But don't blame me when she eats you out of house and home." Laughter erupted again, but Silas ignored it. He shrugged off his coat and draped it over Eliza's shoulders, the heavy wolf fur engulfing her completely. "Let's go," he murmured. Eliza barely managed to whisper, Why are you helping me?" Silas looked down at her with a depth she couldn't decipher, because no one else did. And with that, he led her away from the crowd, toward a waiting horse, and toward a life she could never have imagined. The storm had thickened into a wall of white by the time Silas lifted Eliza onto his horse. Snow swirled so heavily around them that the town seemed to vanish behind a curtain of frost. Eliza clung to the saddle horn, her breath trembling in the frigid air. Silas swung up behind her in one smooth motion, the leather creaking under his weight. His presence was immense, warm, solid, grounding. She could feel his body heat even through the heavy wolf fur coat wrapped around her. "Hold on," he murmured. Eliza hesitated, unsure where to put her hands. Touching him felt too intimate, too bold. But the horse shifted under them, and panic fluttered in her chest. Silas placed his hands over hers, guiding them to his middle. "Here," he said, "you won't fall." Her fingers curled instinctively into his coat. He nudged the horse forward, and they rode into the trees, two silhouettes swallowed by wilderness. For a long while, nothing existed except the rhythmic crunch of hooves in snow and the low howl of wind threading through the pines. Eliza's chest tightened with every breath. The world had shrunk into this horse, this stranger, this terrifying unknown. But Silas rode with a patience that calmed her trembling nerves. He didn't spur the horse forward recklessly, didn't bark orders, didn't ask invasive questions. He simply guided them deeper into the winter wood, as if he'd done it 1,000 times before. Finally she whispered, Where are we going?" "My cabin," he answered. "A few miles into the ridge. The storm will get worse by nightfall. You won't survive it in town." Eliza swallowed. "I didn't mean to trouble you. You didn't have to do any of this." Silas's voice came from behind her, quiet but firm. "I did." "Why?" His silence stretched long enough she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "No one deserves what happened to you." Her breath hitched. No one had ever spoken about her pain like that, not even her own family. The horse turned onto a narrow path between towering pines. Branches heavy with snow brushed Eliza's shoulders. Despite the cold, she was sweating beneath Silas's coat, her nerves stretched taut. If he chose to harm her, no one would hear her scream. No one would even look for her. Her voice cracked as she said, "You don't know me. I don't know you. How do I know you're not dangerous?" Silas let out a rough breath, almost a scoff, almost a laugh, but not unkind. "You don't," he said honestly, "just like I don't know you." He shifted slightly, adjusting his hold on the reins. "But I gave you my coat. If I meant you harm, I wouldn't have bothered keeping you warm." She blinked, a tiny sense of logic piercing through fear. That was true. "And if I wanted you dead," he added dryly, "I wouldn't be taking you into the mountains. Too much work to drag a body down." A startled laugh escaped her, thin, trembling, but real. Silas didn't smile, but she felt his shoulders relax behind her. Another hour passed. The forest grew denser, darker. Snow thickened on the trail, forcing the horse to slow to a careful walk. Eliza's legs ached. Her fingers grew numb even under the coat sleeves. Silas noticed. "Lean back," he instructed. "What?" "Lean back on me. It's warmer." Her cheeks flushed hot despite the cold. I couldn't. You're freezing, he said simply. Lean back. She obeyed, hesitantly at first, then all the way until her spine rested against his chest. Heat radiated through her entire body. Silas shifted his arms just enough to hold the reins while creating a shield around her. The storm raged on, but for the first time all day, Eliza felt safe. They rode like that through the longest stretch of forest yet, their breaths forming clouds that blended into the winter air. Eventually, she whispered, "Why did you really take me?" Silas's voice dropped lower. "I've seen cruelty up close, too much of it. Couldn't stomach seeing more." She swallowed hard. "You don't think I'm disgusting?" she dared to ask. Silas's grip on the reins tightened, not in anger, but in something sharper. "No," he answered. Then again, this time slower. "No." Eliza closed her eyes, tears threatening. At last, through the veil of white, she saw a faint glow, an orange flicker moving between the trees. As they drew closer, she realized it was lantern light, hanging from the porch of a sturdy log cabin nestled against the mountainside. Smoke curled from a stone chimney. Warmth and safety radiated from it like a beacon. Silas brought the horse to a stop and dismounted with practiced ease. He reached up, hands steady around her waist. "I've got you," he said quietly. He lifted her down, her boots sinking into the snow. She wobbled, and his hands remained on her waist longer than necessary, steadying her, grounding her. "Inside," he said. "You're half frozen." She limped toward the cabin. He walked beside her, close enough to shield her from the wind. He opened the door, motioning her in first. The moment she stepped inside, heat from a roaring fire washed over her skin. The scent of wood smoke and cedar filled her lungs. But more than that, she felt something shift deep inside. This place wasn't a cage. It wasn't a stranger's trap. It felt safe, safer than anywhere she'd been in years. And Silas McCrae, this quiet, unreadable mountain man, was the reason she was still alive. She turned to him, whispering, "Thank you." Silas looked at her for a long, unreadable moment. Then he shut the door against the storm and said, "You're welcome." Warmth hit Eliza like a tide. The cabin's interior glowed with firelight, rich amber and gold flickers dancing across wooden walls, polished smooth by time and solitude. A thick bearskin rug stretched before the hearth, and bundles of dried herbs hung from beams overhead. It was simple, rugged, masculine, yet somehow comforting. Silas shut the door behind them, sealing out the storm. Snow loosened from his coat and hair, melting into droplets on the floorboards. "Sit by the fire," he said. "You're shaking." Eliza glanced down. Her hands were trembling violently, fingertips pale from the cold. She obeyed, lowering herself onto a sturdy wooden chair near the hearth. Heat seeped into her bones so fast it almost hurt. Silas shrugged off his coat and hung it near the fire. Without the heavy fur, she saw the breadth of him, broad shoulders, a chest built from years of labor, arms roped with muscle. He looked like a man carved from the mountains themselves. She swallowed hard. He crouched beside the hearth, tossing fresh logs onto the flames. Sparks swirled upward like tiny fireflies. "You'll warm up faster with something hot in you," he said. "Soup won't take long." Eliza shook her head instinctively. "I don't want to be a burden. You've already done so much." Silas cut her off, tone flat, but not unkind. "You're not a burden. Sit still." He stood and crossed to the corner where a cast-iron pot sat atop a small stove. As he stirred its contents, Eliza watched him from the chair, studying the quiet way he moved, the steadiness in his gestures. Unlike the men in town, he wasn't boastful or loud. He didn't take up space with noise, only presence, a presence that made her heart pound. Is this really your home?" she asked softly. "It is." "You live here alone?" "Yes." "Doesn't it get lonely?" He paused, spoon mid-air. His shoulders tightened just a fraction. "Sometimes," he said quietly. Before she could ask more, he ladled soup into a wooden bowl and set it in front of her. Thick stew, meat, potatoes, carrots, broth scented with thyme. The steam carried warmth straight into her lungs. "Eat," he said. Eliza hesitated. "It's too much. I shouldn't eat so." Silas leaned against the table, arms crossed. "Who taught you that?" Her voice shrank. "Everyone. Everyone's wrong." Something in his eyes dared her to believe him. She lifted the spoon. The first sip sent shivers through her, not from cold, but from the realization of how long it had been since she tasted something warm, nourishing, made by human hands rather than bought with the last of her savings at a depot stall. Silas watched just long enough to be sure she would eat, then moved to clean snow from his boots. He worked in silence, the fire crackling between them. At last, Eliza whispered, "Thank you. Truly." He didn't look up. "Eat more." She did. When she finished the last drop, she sighed, soft, grateful. "This is the first time I've felt safe in months." Silas paused again. His gaze flicked toward her, not pitying, not invasive, just present. "You're safe here." Those 3 words struck her deeper than she expected. Her eyes stung. She stood to carry her bowl to the basin, but Silas intercepted her, taking it from her hands. "You're still cold. I'll wash it." "But I can—" "Eliza." Just her name and his voice, steady, quiet, inexplicably gentle, made her fall silent. "Sit back down," he said. "Warm your hands." She obeyed. Minutes passed in peaceful silence. The storm howled outside. Inside, firelight softened the sharp planes of Silas's face as he washed the dishes with slow, methodical movements. Eventually, he dried his hands on a cloth and approached her again. "I'll show you around. You should know the cabin." He offered no smile, just a slight tilt of his head toward the far wall, and yet, somehow, it felt like trust. He led her first to the small adjoining room. "This is your space," he said. "Bed, blanket, storage. If you need more clothes, I have fabric and needles. You can make what you like." Eliza touched the quilt folded neatly at the foot of the bed. Soft wool, thick stitching, handmade. Someone had cared enough to craft it with precision. "You made this?" she asked. Silas shrugged. "Had to learn. Winters are long." "It's beautiful." He paused as if unused to compliments. "It keeps you warm. That's what matters." Next, he showed her the pantry, jars of dried beans, bundles of herbs, smoked meat hanging from hooks. "I hunt during the fall, so there's enough for winter," he explained. "We'll ration it. Won't go hungry." "We, not I. Not you. We." Her breath caught. Last, he showed her the door he had forbidden her from entering earlier, his own room. He didn't open it, only rested a hand on the latch. "This is mine. I need time alone sometimes." "You're not to enter unless I ask." She nodded immediately. "Of course." He looked relieved, not because she agreed, but because she understood. When the tour ended, they returned to the hearth. Eliza sat. Silas remained standing a moment, watching the flames. "You're safe here," he repeated quietly, "but that doesn't mean you have to stay. When the storm passes, you can leave if you choose." Her chest tightened. And go where? Silas didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. She had nowhere, and he wasn't the type to lie to her with false promises. So she asked, her voice small, "Do you want me to stay?" He turned then, meeting her eyes directly for the first time since they entered the cabin. Firelight flickered across his face, softening the stern lines, revealing something gentle but guarded. "It's your choice," he said, "but if you do, I'll treat you with respect, and you won't be hungry or cold or alone." A lump rose in her throat. No one had ever spoken to her like this, not as an obligation, not as an object, not as a burden, but as a person. She looked down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. Then she whispered, "I think I'd like to stay, at least for now." Silas nodded once, slow and certain. "Then you stay." He stepped away, giving her space, but his voice followed her, soft as falling snow. "Rest. When you wake, I'll teach you how to use the wood stove, and tomorrow we'll fetch water from the creek." Eliza smiled for the first time in days. "Thank you." Silas's back was to her, yet she swore she saw his shoulders ease, just slightly. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, warmth bloomed, quiet, fragile, but real. Snow had fallen nonstop for 2 days. The mountains lay buried under white drifts, deep enough to swallow a man whole. Inside the cabin, life settled into a fragile rhythm. Quiet, steady, deceptively peaceful. But peace never lasts long in the Montana wilderness. Silas noticed the first sign of trouble before Eliza did. He was chopping firewood behind the cabin when he saw it. Fresh boot tracks in the snow, leading toward the ridge. Prints far too large to belong to Eliza, too deep to belong to a traveler passing through. He crouched, gloved fingers brushing the imprint. Men, several, moving in a pack. He stood slowly. Someone had been watching the cabin. He didn't tell Eliza immediately, not until he understood what danger stalked them. He didn't want her fear to grow roots before it had to. Inside, she hummed softly while kneading dough. Her sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her cheeks glowed pink from the warmth of the hearth. She had flour dusted in her hair and a little dab on her nose she hadn't noticed yet. Silas caught himself smiling, actually smiling, before he wiped it away. "Something wrong?" she asked, glancing up. "No." He set the firewood by the stove. "Bread smells good." Her face lit up like sunrise. "It's my mother's recipe." Silas paused, an opening. She rarely spoke about her past. "What was she like?" he asked. Eliza hesitated, fingers still working the dough. "Gentle, soft-spoken, always tired." Her voice weakened. "She died when I was 16. Silas stepped closer. "I'm sorry." Eliza shook her head. It was a long time ago. But he could see how the memory weighed on her, an ache that never healed. "What about your father?" Silas asked carefully. Her hand stilled. A shadow crossed her face. "I don't have one." He frowned. "Everyone has a father." "Not in the way you mean." She swallowed. "My mother worked as a housemaid for a wealthy merchant. She got pregnant. He fired her when she refused to get rid of the baby." Silas's breath hitched. "He blamed me," she whispered, "for everything." She looked small, softer, more breakable than he'd ever seen her. "And the merchant?" Silas asked. "He had a family, reputation." Eliza laughed bitterly. "He pretended we didn't exist. My mother raised me alone. When she died, I worked sewing dresses, saved every dollar. When the mail-order bride ads came, I thought—" her eyes welled, "I thought maybe someone would want me." Silas's chest tightened, anger burning slow and deep. No one should speak about themselves that way. "Eliza," he said softly, "you're wanted." She blinked, breath catching. He didn't know how to say the rest, that he wanted her here, in this cabin, in this life. But before he could find the words, a loud cracking sound came from outside, a twig snapping. Silas stiffened. He crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbed his rifle from the wall, and headed for the door. Eliza froze. "Silas, what is it? What's out there?" He didn't answer. He pushed the door open and stepped into the blinding white. The wind had softened. Snow fell lazily, thin as feather down. Silas scanned the tree line. Nothing moved, but the tracks were there, deeper than before. Eliza crept to his side. "Silas, I'm scared." He lowered the gun but kept it in his hand. Back inside. They shut the door behind them. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, walls closing in around her fear. "Silas," she whispered, "who was out there?" "Not sure yet," he said quietly, "but someone's been close." "Close?" Her voice shrank. "Why would anyone come here?" Silas set the rifle aside and faced her fully. He rarely looked anyone in the eyes, and never this long. "Eliza, tell me the real reason you left Ohio." Her breath stopped. I told you. My life there was not that part." His voice hardened. "The part you haven't said." Eliza stepped back as though struck. "I don't know what you're—" "Eliza!" He said her name gently, but with a weight she couldn't escape. "Who is looking for you?" Silas wasn't angry. He wasn't even suspicious. He was protective enough to push for the truth. Her shoulders curled inward. "I never meant for this to follow me," she whispered. "I just wanted to start over." "Eliza," he said softer, "what followed you?" She gripped the table until her knuckles whitened. Words trembled on her lips. "My mother kept letters," she finally whispered, "from him, the man who fathered me." Silas's jaw tightened. "He didn't want me when I was a baby," she said, "but his sons found out last year. They said I was a stain on their family name, that I shouldn't exist. They came to the house. They searched it. They said they'd find me." Silas's blood ran cold. "How long ago?" he asked. 3 months, she whispered, "before I left Ohio." Silas took a slow breath, and then everything clicked. The tracks, the feeling of being watched, the fact that they weren't from Coldwater Junction. "Eliza," he said quietly, "I think they found you." Her knees gave out. She sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "No," she whispered. No, please. I can't go back." Silas crouched in front of her, big hands closing gently around her wrists. "Look at me." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "You're not alone," he said. "You hear me?" Her throat tightened. "I don't care who they are," Silas continued. "If they come here, they won't touch you, not while I'm breathing." Her tears fell in silent streams. "Silas, they're dangerous." "So am I." He rose slowly, picked up his gun, and checked the chamber. Outside, the snow stopped falling. The forest grew still, too still. Someone was out there, watching, waiting. "Eliza," Silas said without turning, "lock the doors, stay close to the fire, and don't open that door for anyone but me." Her voice trembled. "Silas, don't go far." He paused at the threshold. "I won't," he said. But the truth was harsher. Danger was already closer than she knew. The wind had died completely. The kind of silence that falls before something terrible happens settled over the ridge, heavy, listening, holding its breath. Eliza stayed by the fire exactly as Silas told her, hands clasped tight, her pulse drumming in her throat. She kept glancing at the door as if it might explode inward at any moment. And outside, Silas moved like a shadow. He circled the cabin, boots sinking into the fresh powder. He followed the boot tracks until they veered toward the tree line. The prints were wide, deep, sharp-edged. Men unfamiliar with mountain snow left tracks like that. But Silas McCrae was not unfamiliar. He saw the signs immediately. 3 men, heavy builds, armed, watching the cabin from the cover of spruce and pine. He crouched low behind a drift, scanning the shadows. He didn't see them, not yet, but the forest gave itself away. A magpie flew from a branch too suddenly. A squirrel chattered a warning cry. They were close, and they were waiting for the right moment. Silas rose slowly, grip tightening on his rifle. Not tonight. He angled back toward the cabin, stepping soundlessly until he reached the doorway. He placed one hand on the latch, and that was when he heard it. A crunch behind him. Snow compacted under someone's boot. Silas spun. A man burst from the trees, lunging forward with a pistol raised. McCrae! Silas fired first. The gunshot cracked across the mountainside. The stranger stumbled, dropped his gun, and fell hard into the snow, clutching his shoulder. Inside the cabin, Eliza screamed. Silas didn't have time to reassure her. Another shouted voice rang through the trees. "He's hit, Caleb! Get the girl!" Eliza's hunters had come. Silas ducked behind a chopped wood stack just as 2 more men charged from the tree line. One fired. Bullets tore splinters from the wood inches from Silas's head. Another shot pinged off the iron stovepipe. He gritted his teeth. He had 1 gun. 3 men, and Eliza terrified inside the cabin. The odds didn't matter. He'd faced worse, for far less important reasons. A man shouted, "We know she's in there. Bring her out and we'll let you live." Silas felt molten rage burn up his spine. He stepped out from behind the woodpile, firing once, twice, clean, controlled shots. 1 man fell. The other scrambled for cover, swearing violently. "You don't touch her!" Silas roared, voice echoing off the ridge. Eliza pressed her hands to her mouth inside the cabin. Her whole body trembled. She could hear men screaming outside, gunfire cracking through the stillness. She whispered, "Silas, please don't die. Please don't die." Outside, Silas charged the last man before the stranger could reload. They collided hard in the snow. The man grabbed Silas's coat, swinging wildly. Silas took the blows, then drove an elbow into his jaw. The man spat blood, snarled, and pulled a knife from his belt. He lunged. Silas blocked the blade with his forearm, hissed in pain, and slammed his fist into the man's ribs. Another strike. Another. The man dropped to his knees. Silas wrenched the knife away, ripped it from his grip, and pressed the blade to the man's throat. "Who sent you?" Silas growled. The man gasped. "Her brothers, her father's sons, paid us. Said she ran away. Said she's a stain on their name. They want her dead before she ruins their inheritance." Silas's blood went cold. Eliza's past had exactly the face he expected, ugly, entitled, cowardly. He didn't hesitate. "Go back to Ohio," Silas said, voice like stone. "Tell them if they come for her again, I'll bury them in the mountain." The man scrambled to his feet, clutching his broken ribs. He staggered into the trees, tripping over roots as he fled. Silas watched until the forest swallowed the last trace of him. Then the pain hit, raw and sharp along his wounded arm. He pressed his hand over the cut, breath tightening. "Silas!" Eliza burst through the cabin door, skirts flying, eyes wide with terror. She rushed to him. "You're bleeding!" "I'm fine," he muttered. "You're not." She grabbed his face in both hands, her tears mixing with the falling snow. "You could have died." He looked at her, really looked, her trembling lips, her wet lashes, her fear for him. "Eliza," he whispered, "I told you, they won't take you while I'm breathing." She shook her head. "But what about when you're not?" Silas rested his forehead against hers. "Then I'll keep breathing," he said, and he meant it. Snow had begun falling again, slow, soft flakes drifting down like feathers shaken from heaven. The forest was silent now, emptied of danger, washed clean by cold and moonlight. But inside the cabin, the air trembled with something far warmer and far more fragile. Silas sat at the table while Eliza tended the cut on his arm. Her hand shook as she cleaned the wound. A burn of guilt tightened his chest. He'd faced wolves, blizzards, and armed men without flinching, but watching her cry over him nearly undid him. "You should have stayed inside," he murmured. "You should have come back sooner," she answered, voice barely above a whisper. Silas didn't smile. He didn't joke. He simply watched the way her fingers brushed his skin, gentle, almost reverent. She finished bandaging his arm, but she didn't pull away. Her hand lingered on him, resting lightly, as if she feared he might disappear if she let go. "Are they really gone?" she finally asked. "For now," Silas said, "and as long as I'm alive, no one will cross this ridge without me knowing." Eliza swallowed. "They were willing to kill you just to reach me?" "Then they miscalculated," he said simply. She bowed her head, breath shaking. "I don't want anyone else hurt because of me." Silas lifted her chin with his free hand, slow and careful. "Eliza," he said softly, "you're not a burden. You're not a problem to solve or a mouth to feed or a weight to carry. You're a woman who has spent her life believing lies someone else put in her head." Her eyes filled with tears. "And you?" she whispered. "What do you believe?" Silas inhaled deeply, steadying himself, choosing honesty over caution for the first time in years. "I believe," he said, "that I sleep easier knowing you're under this roof. I believe the cabin feels less empty with you in it. I believe that tonight, when I heard you scream my name, something in me changed. I knew I'd kill for you." He paused, voice thickening. "But I also knew I'd live for you." Eliza's breath caught. Silas leaned closer, his forehead brushing hers, his voice dropping to a confession meant only for her ears. "You're safe here." The words vibrated through her, soft, certain, unmovable as the mountains outside. "You don't know that," she whispered. "They'll come back. My family doesn't forgive or forget." "Then neither do I," Silas said, "and I don't lose." A tear slid down her cheek, and he caught it with his thumb. "Eliza, this is your home now, if you'll have it." The cabin seemed to hold its breath. The fire crackled. The wind murmured against the window, snow piled gently on the sill. Eliza looked at him, not with fear or apology or uncertainty, but something braver, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "Silas," she whispered, voice trembling but sure, "I want this to be my home." His eyes closed for one stunned second. When he opened them, something warm and fierce burned in the gray. "Then it is." She leaned forward. He met her halfway. Their foreheads touched. Their hands found each other. Their hearts steadied into a shared rhythm. Outside, the world was cold, dark, and cruel. But in that moment, inside the cabin, Two wounded souls chose each other, and the mountains bore witness. Some stories aren't really about cabins, mountains, or winter storms. They're about people like Eliza, people who've been mocked, abandoned, or made to feel unworthy, finally finding someone who sees past all the scars and all the weight the world has put on their shoulders. If you're listening to this right now, tell me, where in the world are you hearing this story from? I read every comment, and if you still believe that love can bloom in unlikely places between two broken hearts who choose each other despite everything, don't go far. The next story is already making its way to you.